So picture early 1900s Paris. It's the Belle Époque, a time of elegance, invention, and progress, or so the history books would like you to believe. Beneath the surface, the city was simmering with discontent. Workers were striking, anarchist ideas were spreading like wildfire, and inequality was making the wealthy even more obnoxious. Enter Jules Bonnot, a man who decided that if the system wasn't going to work for him, he was going to burn it down. Literally. Bonnot wasn't your typical criminal. Born in 1876, he grew up in poverty and bounced around menial jobs before finding work as a chauffeur and mechanic. And while he wasn't exactly the picture of an ideal employee, Bonnot had one thing going for him: a knack for machines. This guy could strip an engine faster than you can say, illegalist, and he soon realized that his talents could fund his dreams of chaos, destruction, and sticking it to the bourgeoisie. By 1911, Bonnot had gathered a crew of like-minded anarchists, each one angrier and more disenfranchised than the last. There was Octave Garnier, a hot-headed revolutionary, Raymond Calaman, an idealist turned nihilist, and André Soudi, the youngest member, barely out of his teens and itching to make history. Together, they formed the Bonnot Gang, a group of self-proclaimed illegalists who believed that robbing banks wasn't just a way to make money, it was a political statement. But let's get one thing straight. These weren't just anarchists waving black flags and shouting slogans. The Bonnot Gang wanted results. And their big idea? The getaway car. At a time when horses still outnumbered automobiles, this gang was stealing cars, loading them with weapons, and leaving the cops eating dust. It was revolutionary, it was dangerous, and it was just stupid enough to work. Their first major heist happened on December 21, 1911, at the Société Générale bank in Paris. Bonnot himself drove the car, a sleek de Dion Bouton, while Garnier and Calaman stormed the bank. Inside, they wasted no time shooting a bank clerk, grabbing as much cash as they could carry, and bolting out the door. The sight of a car speeding away from a crime scene was so shocking that eyewitnesses couldn't even describe what had just happened. The police, still relying on horses, didn't stand a chance. The heist made headlines across France. Some called them visionaries, others called them monsters. Either way, the Bonnot Gang was officially infamous, and they loved it. Over the next few months, they pulled off a series of robberies, each one bolder than the last. They raided factories, looted armories, and even a police officer in broad daylight. Their crimes weren't just about money. They were about sending a message. The old world was crumbling, and they were here to push it over the edge. But like all good crime stories, things started to go south. For one, the gang was growing reckless. Their heists were getting sloppier, and their escapes less seamless. On March 25, 1912, during a robbery at the Société Générale in Chantilly, the gang two clerks and barely escaped with their lives. The public, once fascinated by their audacity, was now terrified. The police, humiliated by their inability to catch them, doubled down on their efforts. Meanwhile, cracks were forming within the gang. Paranoia set in as the pressure mounted. Garnier and Calaman started clashing with Bonnot, accusing him of hogging the spotlight. Members began turning on each other, and by April 1912, the gang was in full meltdown mode. Bonnot's end came on April 24, 1912, in the most spectacular way possible. Cornered in a house in Choisy-le-Roi, he barricaded himself inside, armed to the teeth. The police, tired of being outsmarted, brought out the big guns, literally. After a tense standoff, they blew the house to smithereens. Bonnot's body was pulled from the rubble, riddled with bullets, but his legacy was far from over. The surviving members of the gang tried to keep the dream alive, but it was clear their days were numbered. By May 1912, most of them were either captured or killed in similarly dramatic shootouts. Their trial, held later that year, was a media sensation. The gang's anarchist ideals were put on trial alongside their crimes, and while their political philosophy garnered some sympathy, the jury wasn't feeling generous. The verdict? Death by for Garnier and Calaman, and life sentences for the few who managed to avoid execution. In the end, the Bonnot Gang was less a gang and more a phenomenon. They weren't just criminals, they were revolutionaries, innovators, and, let's face it, a bit unhinged. Their use of cars and modern weaponry made them pioneers of organized crime, while their anarchist rhetoric turned them into legends. Love them or hate them, one thing's for sure: you don't forget the gang that changed the game. Thanks for watching, and if you're as fascinated by tales like these as we are, make sure to stick around for more.